We gather on a day of profound joy, of soaring hope, of renewed faith, and above all, a day to give our deepest thanks to the Almighty God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
President Trump with a powerful speech in Jerusalem yesterday, and he had a lot to say. In fact, a new column argues Trump's triumph is bad news for his adversaries. Here's a quote: Trump's successes make for bad news for his most zealous opponents. There was Trump addressing the Knesset, standing by the Israeli flag, receiving ovation after ovation. Let's just say it wasn't a good time for the Trump is Hitler people. All of that a quote in that op-ed in the Washington Examiner. Here are some of those people.
We have a Timu Hitler in the White House right now that thinks that he is going to become the dictator of the United States.
I studied the Holocaust. I helped to build a Holocaust museum. This is what happened in the early days of the Nazi regime in Germany.
Donald Trump's modern-day Gestapo is scooping folks up off the streets. They're in unmarked vans, wearing masks, being shipped off to foreign torture dungeons.
Kind of like, the orange orangutan, the Timu Hitler.
Disgusting. Many are looking ahead to what's next for the president's peace plans. And the Wall Street Journal editorial board has this headline: Trump's hostage triumph in Jerusalem. And it argues, quote, past hopes for peace have been crushed. Hamas gave in not to make peace, but because its alternatives were worse. It seeks to exploit the ceasefire to restore its power and return to war. Several Hamas leaders have already said the group won't disarm, and the terrorists may be reinvigorated by Israel's release of nearly 2,000 prisoners. That's a quote. Action on the ground today. Israel says its troops have fired on suspects in Gaza who crossed the boundary line, which was set up in part of the phases of agreement. And in focus now, Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State and former CIA director, also a Fox News contributor. Great to see you. First of all, what do you make of just kind of the tenderness, the fragility, perhaps, of where we are in this peace agreement as, kind of it's categorized by the enemies of Trump?
Yes, Harris. Well, good morning. Great to be with you. It is fragile. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But what joy we saw and what power we saw exercised by President Trump and the Israeli leadership, right? This is exactly the opposite of what President Biden did. What President Trump did is he put pressure on Hamas. He told the Israelis, go do what's necessary. And Hamas then had no choice. The Wall Street Journal's piece is exactly right. Hamas no more wants peace than a man in the moon. They gave in because they were about to have the noose tightened on them even more. And so in this moment of great joy, and to say these families reunited is remarkable, the pressure cannot be relieved. The fact that the Israelis still control a good deal of Gaza, the fact that we still don't have the bodies of those slain hostages home, that all tells you that there's a lot more work that remains to be done. But President Trump is perfectly positioned to lead the charge to do just that.
Do you see a reinvigorated Hamas after all of this?
Not if we do this right. And here we, as an American leadership team, just as we have seen unfold with Midnight Hammer over Natanz and Fordow, and with Gulf Arab partners who say, no, we're going to take out the tunnels. We're going to continue to apply pressure. When Hamas does what it will ultimately do, it's a resistance movement. When it resists, we go back at it. There'll be moments like that. We have to be serious about that. If we get that right, we can continue to apply the pressure necessary to achieve the peace and stability that President Trump has worked so diligently to achieve this remarkable moment.
Yeah. So the fragility is real, and having those partners in the Middle East lean in with us will be very real and necessary as well.
Amen.
Ukrainian President Zelensky is hoping that the president's Middle East success could mean peace in Ukraine. Watch.
Ceasefire, it's big, huge step to peace deal. That's why I think this is real success. And of course, it gives signals for us and hope that with such pressure, what President Trump used in Middle East to make peace, and I hope that he will use the same instruments even more to pressure Putin to stop his war in Ukraine.
President Trump, on his way back from the Middle East last night, said he expects to host Zelensky at the White House this Friday. Zelensky posted this. The main focus of the visit is air defense and our long-range capabilities aimed at exerting pressure on Russia for the sake of peace. President Trump on Air Force One last night. Let's watch.
I might have to speak to Russia, to be honest with you, about Tomahawks. Do they want to have Tomahawks going in their direction? I don't think so. I think I might speak to Russia about that, in all fairness. I told that to President Zelensky, because Tomahawks are a new step of aggression.
Now, if memory serves me, that's what the president had fired into Syria after chem weapons were used by Bashar al-Assad. I remember the USS, I think it was the Monterey, I don't want to say it wrong, but the ship that carried them fired so many into that. He's not joking. Putin should be worried, should he not?
Harris, I remember that moment, too. I was the CIA director at the time when we fired dozens of Tomahawk missiles after Assad had used chemical weapons on his own people. Look, I think your clip showed it perfectly. The parallels are very real. Vladimir Putin is no more going to give up because he wants peace. I mean, that's crazy, right? He's going to give up when he realizes that is his only option, and more pressure being applied, whether it's the Tomahawks or allowing the Ukrainians to target economic and military targets inside of Ukraine, or inside of Russia, rather, deep inside. Those are the kind of things that just as we put pressure on Hamas and forced them to the negotiating table to give up, at least for the moment, the way to get a ceasefire in Ukraine is precisely the same. More pressure on Vladimir Putin will ultimately achieve that end. And I think whether it was Operation Midnight Hammer or what we've seen unfold in the last days, I think Putin must be strongly thinking President Trump is a serious man, totally prepared to deliver peace to Europe in the same way that he's done in the Middle East.
Yeah, I mean, Senator Thune moments ago brought up Iran and what the president did there to that mountain that housed the nuclear facility. He said, you know, you pay attention to those sorts of things. Your last quick thought.
Yes, I think that's right. And President Trump has a long history of this. You'll remember the strike on General Soleimani that we took in the first term. No one thought we'd do it. They thought it might cause World War III. In fact, it delivered a temporary peace in the Middle East. President Trump has demonstrated he knows how to use American power. It's not about deploying the 82nd Airborne and sending lots of troops. It's using all the tools in the American arsenal to deliver good outcomes for America and for the world.
All right. Good to see you. Thank you very much. Glad you were part of our show.
Have a wonderful day.
You too.
The 20 Israeli hostages are spending their first full day of freedom following their release by Hamas terrorists. We're learning details tonight about some of the people who held them captive. The ceasefire signed Monday appears to be holding, but President Trump is already sending a warning to Hamas about upholding its end of the deal and Phase 2. Chief National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin reports tonight from Tel Aviv.
If they don't disarm, we will disarm them. They know I'm not playing games.
President Trump with a warning to Hamas, which is already in breach of the agreement by not returning all 28 of the deceased Israeli hostages. In Gaza, Hamas terrorists continued carrying out extrajudicial killings in public squares of those they suspect of collaborating with Israel and clans they suspect could threaten their authority. We spoke by phone with a Palestinian woman in Gaza who described to us the mood there.
Oh my God, we're all so happy that finally this deal is happening and we have this ceasefire.
We obtained this video from another Palestinian known to Fox for years, showing his house before the October 7th Hamas terror attack. This is what he found when he returned home after the ceasefire. 4 additional coffins with deceased hostages were returned to Israel tonight, bringing the total to 8. Israel returned 45 Palestinian corpses late Monday.
Now we must bring everyone back. That is the only way this story can truly end.
Information about the identities of some of the hostages' Hamas captors is now slowly trickling out. Quote, one of the guards was a first-grade teacher, another was a lecturer at a university, and another was a doctor. These are normal people becoming terrorists. President Trump was asked on his way back to the U.S. about a Palestinian state.
I'm talking about something very much different. We're talking about rebuilding Gaza. I'm not talking about single state or double state or two state.
As part of the deal signed in Egypt, the Gulf states promised to rebuild Gaza.
Those are, really seriously rich countries, and they can handle it.
The reality may be different. The Israeli military, which still controls 53% of the Gaza Strip as part of the agreement and as a buffer zone, shot and killed several Palestinians today who they said got too close to their positions. Brett.
Jennifer Griffin live in Tel Aviv. Jennifer, thank you.
President Trump announcing that phase 2 in the ceasefire agreement has begun, and he's putting pressure on Hamas to put down its arms.
They will disarm. And I spoke to Hamas. And I said, you're going to disarm, right? Yes, sir, we're going to disarm. That's what they told me. They will disarm or we will disarm them. Got it? Okay.
What is the deadline you're going to put on that? You say quickly, sir. Sir, you said quickly, but what is the deadline you're going to put on that before you take action?
A reasonable period of time. Pretty quickly. A reasonable period of time.
And he was getting some well-earned praise for his historic peace efforts. Time magazine heralding Trump's triumph on its cover, but President Trump wasn't too happy about the photo they used. He said, quote, Time magazine wrote a relatively good story about me, but the picture may be the worst of all time. They disappeared my hair. Meanwhile, President Trump's critics are getting back into the groove of calling him an authoritarian leader.
You name it. The Trump administration has taken an unprecedented policy of extorting these institutions to toe the Trump political line, and that is the stuff of dictatorships.
He has definitely decided he's going to use the power of the federal government to attack American cities and the people who live there.
In a country that is losing its democracy, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Complain? Yes.
Every authoritarian leader has had his grim reaper.
Okay, let's go. Let's start with this. Harold, I kind of liked the photograph. I thought it was flattering of President Trump, and you liked it too?
I did.
Are you in agreement?
I'm in agreement with you. If they ever decide to put me on the cover of Time, you can disappear my hair as long as you say.
You were on the cover of Newsweek, weren't you?
I was, and they had my hair.
Yeah.
I'd say a couple of things. First, the president deserves an incredible amount of credit here. I think listening to him today, if not all the credit, you read the piece there, the former Prime Minister, Mr. Barack, saying that President Trump was the leader that Israel needed. But here we are now in this second phase. I thought the most newsworthy thing from this press conference, which was overshadowed by a number of things. The Argentinian leader was there, and there were questions about the $20 billion, the line of credit, whether or not we would go forward with it if he is not successful, he being the Argentinian leader in their midterm elections here shortly. And when the president said, we will disarm Hamas if they don't disarm, I mean, I chalked that up as the president just sort of being the president and talking the way that he talks and making it clear that we are firmly behind an effort to disarm them. Two, the questions around whether or not we'll have a two-state solution, and where we are there. I thought the president handled that well, so we've got to get through these phases here. And I think it's important that Democrats and even Republicans and certainly Democrats give him a little space here. This accomplishment by the president not only should be applauded, but we should be trying to figure out ways to help him, which helping him helps us, helps the United States. Having said that, the president should not think, nor should anyone believe, that all politics is now on hold, that people have to agree with the president on everything that he's done. I'm saying what I believe the president's doing here is the right thing. Give him the space to get this done. But when it comes to other issues, domestic issues, people are going to have their disagreements with him. And guess what? That's American politics and always has been.
It is weird for some of these leaders, Lawrence, that they can't read the room because
Thank you.
President Trump delivered the peace. There was very little help from the European partners, very little support from the experts, nothing from the UN, nothing from the UN. If the UN was in charge of this, it had gone on for another 10 years.
So a couple things. If you failed at achieving peace, okay, we don't need your weigh in on this. You failed. It's like the person that loses a game and then wants to coach the person to a successful championship. Really, it's not needed. Number two, the Hitler talk has to stop. I mean, the Israelis, the Jewish state gave him the highest honor. The Hitler debate is gone now. It's over. The Jews have decided. They've decided. Their country have decided. The Jewish state has said he's the best president in American history. We're giving him the highest honor ever. Okay, and then the third thing. I'm not saying Democrats can't disagree with the president on policy here back at home, but don't make an inconsistent argument. You can't say on one hand he has just achieved decades-long peace with people that can't come together and say he's not willing to work with Congress. That just doesn't make sense. You can't say he's a radical, he's a person that was trying to get people from being blown up and getting beat to death and all that, and he wants the cops to come in the middle of the street and beat people at home. It's inconsistent. And I just think you lose credibility when the president, because of his action, has commanded the world stage and everybody's watching and everybody's celebrating. Even the people, the leaders, the French, the UK that tried to sabotage the deal, all came to a heel. Yeah. Canada too.
And all the people that we showed that were dissing the president, Greg, they were part of the Free Palestine Now.
Yeah.
They wanted the ceasefire.
I mean, when you look, it's pretty obvious. The politicians that are saying authoritarian, it's a surrender. This is not real. They know it's not real. They have nothing left. This is like a guy on his sofa, watched his team lose, and just throwing the beer can at the TV. No one on the other side of the screen can feel it, but it's your way of getting it out. Nothing sticks anymore. But do you honestly think when they call somebody an authoritarian, it sticks? Nobody is it's white noise. Okay. It's like, oh yeah, whatever. You keep talking. As for, do we have Harold's when he was on Newsweek? Look at that, huh? Yeah, not your daddy's Democrat. So anyway, about Trump being on the cover of Time. Trump was always like a 2-hour drive to an hour at the beach. You know, it's like it's going to cost a lot, but when you get to the beach, it's awesome. But the reason why the drive took so long is because his opponents concentrated on making that drive miserable instead of creating an alternative path. Instead of saying, hey, maybe we can get to that beach too, and we can make a better life for you. No, if you choose the Trump path, we are going to call you Hitler. We're going to call you Nazis and authoritarians, and we're going to make sure you pay. But you know what? It's like what I mentioned before about Scott. People still stuck to the path, and they drove all the way to the beach. And now yesterday, you saw the fruits of being at that beach. I do think for a lot of these people, not the politicians, but the people that hate Trump so much, it is the Trump derangement is the scaffolding for their ego. And if that thing starts crumbling, it's going to be a disaster. So you got to let them down slowly. You got to because over time, they're going to realize everything that they were told, the entire narrative was wrong, dead wrong. What are they going to do?
And a quick last word.
Yeah, all I will say is I don't know many authoritarian leaders who won 312 electoral votes, the popular vote, shifted Black, Latino, and young voters by double digits, and outright won the popular vote.
She can wrap it up. I love it.
So joining me now is Tom Nides, former U.S. ambassador to Israel. Tom, good to have you with us. Obviously, a lot of joy mixed with a lot of emotions today for everyone in Israel. This is from the Wall Street Journal that it outlines sort of what happened here. It said, though many aspects of the current deal were on the table for the past year, more than the balance of power in the Middle East has shifted significantly, creating conditions for the breakthrough. Before the meetings wrapped up on the first day, the mediators delivered a warning to Hamas: put your faith in Trump's plan or face endless war. You have 5 days to decide. Your reaction to all this?
Well, first of all, Martha, as you said at the beginning of the show, how beautiful those pictures. These families united that they've been tormented about not seeing their loved ones and be able to embrace them today. This is a beautiful day. Not only is it a beautiful day that these hostage families are united with their families, there's surging humanitarian assistance into Gaza, which is desperately needed. And hopefully, the stage 2 is on its way. So first and foremost, I thank President Trump and Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner for the work they did. And to be clear, a lot of other presidents have also been working on these issues for the Middle East, including the president I work for, Joe Biden. But this is not a time about that. It's a time about celebration of what's happening and the hope of what can come in the future.
So what can come in the future? You've got 35 nations who signed this agreement with Hamas. So they have skin in the game, these nations. They all stood there. A lot of them stood right behind President Trump during this, saying that Hamas can never regain strength. No one will threaten the borders of Israel. And it is a new Middle East. Do you believe that, Tom? Do you think that's what we will see?
Listen, Martha, you've been covering this for a long time, and I've been involved in diplomacy for a long time. this takes a lot of work, and I hope that the president and the president's team, from the Secretary of State to all the people involved in this, understand that this is the first day of a long journey. Dealing in the Middle East, as you know, is a really complicated business, and something that people say on Monday is somewhat interpreted differently on Wednesday. So my hope is that they'll work together to get the accomplished done.
Trump, but one of the thing that has been said is that there's a lot of young leadership around the Middle East these days, and that they don't want to live this life anymore, because as long as I've been alive, it has always almost felt like there were entities who would rather fight than have peace. But it feels like there's a different mood now.
Well, listen, I spent still a lot of time in the Middle East. I agree with you, and I think the street wants it as well. It's not just about the leadership, but the street is demanding. I think one of the things that happened with this war in Gaza is that the street really got the leaderships to recognize this has got to stop. We can't keep doing this over and over and over again. Yes, what happened on October 7th was unusual, but remember, you've been covering this a long time. The rockets going from the Gaza into the Israel was going on year after year after year. Violence in the West Bank, problems in Iran, Hezbollah, the Houthis. It needs to stop, because the people who get hurt the worst are the people who can't defend themselves.
Between Israel and the United States, those entities have been decimated over the past 16 months. I mean, Iran does not have any border munitions, ability to shoot down planes anymore. They are kind of blowing in the wind out there right now. Do you think Iran comes to the table? Because that is one of the biggest questions here.
It's interesting. I worked on the JCPOA, which, of course, President Trump ripped up in his first term. We've always believed at the end of the day, we've got to get Iran to the table. And maybe now, listen, I supported the president's work that he did on Fordo, with the attack on Fordo. I'd hoped it would be done by the JCPOA.
Did you advise that during Biden? I mean, why didn't it happen?
Because we said, as you know, many, many times, we're not going to stand by and let the Iranians get a nuclear weapon. And by the way, as you recall, the first time Iran attacked Israel, the first time, it was President Biden who sent the ships into the Mediterranean, sent General Carrillo, who's still at the CENTCOM, to basically manage that attack. And that was the beginning to show to Iran, America has Israel's back. It was true with Joe Biden. It's certainly true with Donald Trump. And I think that was the beginning of this process. But at the end of the day, my hope is that Iran now understands they need to come to the table, because the whole world is watching, and they are the cancer in the region.
But no president had the guts to do what happened at Fordo under President Trump. Do you agree with that?
I'll give you, certainly, which I supported. If we couldn't get it done by a treaty, which I felt was the right thing to do, I fully support what Donald Trump did as it relates to attacking Fordo.
Tom, thank you. We're all hopeful that this chessboard is moving in the right direction, and that younger generations in the Middle East can live peaceful and prosperous lives. And thank you very much. Good to have you here, as always. Tom Knight is former ambassador to Israel. Thanks for being here, Tom.
Honored.
So what all this could potentially mean.
So thanks to the efforts of President Trump, 20 families have been reunited now that all of the living hostages have been released from Gaza. And now peace in the Middle East is closer than it has been for decades. Joining us now is one of the Democrats applauding the president for this accomplishment in New Jersey, Congressman Josh Gottheimer. Congressman, thanks so much for joining the program this morning.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
So you, like many other Americans, just not Americans, folks all over the world, are applauding the president for this peace agreement. What's your reaction this morning?
Yesterday was a very emotional day, as you know, and I'm sure, like so many people, watching the videos of parents and loved ones hugging their family members after not seeing them for more than 2 years, knowing what was happening in those tunnels, hostages being tortured by Hamas terrorists day in and day out after the October 7th massacre, and what happened not just on that day, but how Hamas treated the hostages after that. So seeing them free and out and with their loved ones, I mean, it was an incredibly emotional day. And I give so much credit to these families who just kept up hope and never given up.
Mm-hmm. Congressman, I think you have great instincts. You're part of the Problem Solvers Caucus. You're always trying to work across the other side of the aisle. What do you say to some of the Democrats that left the president out of the congratulations, even some taking credit for it, saying this was a Biden proposal? You also have Hakeem Jeffries, who said, I'm so relieved and thankful to see the remaining living hostages are now home with their loved ones. He didn't mention the president. Nancy Pelosi, the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas and the release of all the hostages gives hope for what comes next after unbearable suffering. Of course, Bernie Sanders said today we welcome the long overdue release of all 20 remaining Israelis, held by Hamas, and the freeing of almost 2,000 Palestinians held in Israeli prisons. What's your advice for them?
Well, I can't speak for my colleagues, but I can speak for myself.
Yeah.
I know what I believe, which was yesterday was a great day for American leadership, and obviously, thanks to President Trump and his team, it happened. I mean, I had a hostage here from New Jersey, Don Alexander, who's 21, who the president helped free with his team. So, we should give credit where it's due, and this is not a partisan thing. We should all be very proud as Americans of our leadership and what got done thanks to us. And also, by the way, I'm one of these people, and I'm sure you'd agree, that we should give credit to everybody. And so 100 hostages were released in the last administration. We should give credit to them too. And everybody, this is one of those things where everybody who is involved, but especially the parents, everybody should be very proud. And now, as you know, the key is keeping Hamas's feet to the fire, because we still have to get out. We released 20 hostages yesterday, but there's 24 more hostages who we believe are no longer alive, whose remains are in Gaza. We have to hold them accountable until we get every single one out, so that these families can have closure and properly mourn. And and then, of course, we have to make sure that Hamas lays down their weapons and hands over governing power. So there's a lot of work still to do. We all have to work together, stop pointing fingers, and just get this done. And to me, that's the most important thing. Again, great American leadership yesterday. We should all be very proud.
I like the way you think, and you talk about leadership and working together. The government is now being shut down back here at home for 14 days now. What is it going to take to get the government open? Many of the Republicans say, this is just a clean CR. Let's vote for this. And if there is going to be some policy disagreements, then we need to do that in the committees, like regular order requires. Do you disagree?
Well, what I think is there's a big issue, as you probably know, that's out there that has to be dealt with now, because come November 1st, the health insurance marketplace reopens. So that's just in a couple weeks. And families, if we don't do something about this right now, this is not one of these things you can delay and send to a committee and get stuck in bureaucracy. Right now, we got to work together and figure out how to get health insurance premiums down. This is the Affordable Care Act, health insurance premiums. Because if we don't, literally for millions of Americans, you're talking about health insurance prices going up $20,000 a year for a family here in Jersey, for a family of 4, if this doesn't get fixed. And with what the prices people are facing and what they're dealing with from not just health care, but as you know, child care issues and food and energy bills, we got to deal with this. So listen, I'm one of these people who believes we should just sit at the table and work together. I'm already doing that. We should all be in Washington. I'm going there back today. Open up the House, work together,
but Congressman,
literally day in, day out until we get this done. And again, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm short on time. I never want to interrupt. But don't you think that is a debate to have? But in the process, would you vote to open up the government, and then y'all sit at the table to have that back and forth debate? But there's many people that are suffering right now because they don't have the money.
Well, listen, there's a reason why Democrats and Republicans in the House and the Senate have said publicly we got to deal with this now. It's not just Democrats who've said we got to deal with this in insurance premiums now. And you know how it is. If you don't actually solve this problem now and say, let's just punt this thing to later, literally the premiums are going to go up. Nothing will get solved. This is our chance to do it. And I'm not pointing fingers. Yeah. What I'm saying is just let's get at the table. Let's figure it out. Let's work it out. We're close. Many of us are working together. I think we can get there. You saw what we did yesterday in the Middle East. There's no reason why, if we work together, we can't do this. And the president's got great momentum now to say to everyone, okay, let's go. Let's get together in a room and work it out. Right? And that's all I'm asking for, is we can do this.
I got to go, but it's such a great point, because I look at this. This has been an issue for decades in the Middle East. And you see the commander-in-chief get peace in the Middle East, and then he comes back home, and We hear the narrative that he's not willing to work across the side of the aisle. It just doesn't seem true. But I hope that there are more reasonable Democrats like you that are willing to get to the negotiating table so all of our American workers can get paid. Thank you so much for joining the program. I hope you will come back.
Thanks. Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, sir.
I will. Thank you for having me.
So an emotional reunion for former hostages and their loved ones as they meet face-to-face for the first time in over 2 years, thanks to the deal brokered by President Trump.
And we now know the names of the two of the deceased hostages brought back to Israel yesterday.
Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yinks joins us live in Tel Aviv with the latest. Hey, Trey.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. A joyous day as 20 living hostages were released from Hamas captivity. Also, the bodies of 4 others returned to Israel for a proper burial. We have gotten the names from the Israeli military of 2 of those hostages who were returned in coffins. Bipin Joshi from Nepal, he was working near the border during the October 7th massacre, and Guy Iluz, who was a sound technician attending the Nova Music Festival. Overnight, President Trump wrapped up his trip to the Middle East with a summit in Egypt where he signed the Gaza ceasefire deal that allowed the release of these hostages. It was a day of celebration on Monday with so many reunions, former hostages meeting their families again after more than 2 years. We do expect to get more updates on their health conditions today from local hospitals. With 20 living hostages freed from Hamas captivity, negotiators are expected to immediately start working on phase 2 of the agreement. President Trump told me he's confident it's going to work out fine.
I'd like to talk about phase 2 of the deal. Already Hamas has said they're not willing to disarm. What leverage do you have over Hamas at this point?
We have a lot of leverage over them, and the countries that would back them or had backed them in the past are not going to be doing it any further. And I think they want peace also. They've gone through hell. You know, there have been 70,000 killed of them. And they rebuild and they regrow, but it's not easy. And I think they probably say, we don't want this anymore. Look, they agreed to this. They agreed to the terms. So they'd be going against the terms of the agreement. So I think it's going to work out fine. Maybe you're going to have to be a little bit strong about it, or maybe not. But they've agreed to disarm, and they've agreed to other things also.
Inside Gaza, Palestinians continue to return to their homes in the north. A surge of aid and supplies expected to reach those civilians as part of this agreement. You can see in this video here some of the Palestinian prisoners that were freed in this broader deal. The big question remains what comes next. But for now, again, phase 2 is very close. And according to the president, they are working out the details of it now. Guys?
You know, Trey, I'm curious because you've been to Gaza, you've interviewed members of Hamas before. What is the current mood when it comes to the public? I saw the Trump signs and screaming Trump. Are the people rejecting Hamas now, or do they still have some sort of authority over the people?
It's a great question, and it's a really challenging situation right now for Palestinians inside Gaza. Remember, there's more than 2 million people that live there, and President Trump, during our interview yesterday, said he saw the images of Palestinians returning to their homes in the northern part of the enclave, and he said he could see on their faces they're good people. But they're still under partial control of Hamas. And we've seen Hamas just in the past 48 hours crack down on people they accused of working with the Israelis or even opposing them during the war. We've seen videos of executions of civilians over the past 2 days inside Gaza. And so until Hamas lays down their weapons and disarms, it's not only a problem for Israel, but also for the Palestinian people.
Trey, let's talk about the tunnels, because senior IDF commanders are saying that you have to dismantle Hamas's terror tunnels under Gaza. They call it the Gaza Metro. It contains 310 miles of tunnels, half the length of New York's subway system. They're built, as we know, under hospitals, under schools, under civilian areas, and this is where they stockpile weapons and bombs. How are they going to get rid of these tunnels? How do you even get in there when we're not as knowledgeable, or Israel's not as knowledgeable about the area?
Yeah, absolutely. We've reported from some of these tunnels beneath the Gaza Strip, and many of them go 60 or 70 feet underground. And while the Israelis used airstrikes to dismantle much of this tunnel network, especially in the northern part of Gaza, we have to look at the reality of the situation, and that is that Israeli forces did not enter some of the central areas of the Gaza Strip, including the Deir al-Balah area of central Gaza. And we know that there are tunnels there that have not yet been touched. And so Israel still has a long road ahead. The easy way out here is Hamas laying down their weapons, disarming and leaving Gaza as part of this Trump administration peace plan. But if they refuse to do so and this war sparks up again, the Israelis will likely re-enter some of these areas of Gaza where there still is a tunnel network. And so it's a long road ahead. But for right now, the ceasefire is holding and the war is over.
Obviously, Trey, Hamas is behind the 8 ball so far on returning some of the deceased bodies. What are the logistics involved in that, and what might we expect in terms of getting more of those bodies released as promised?
The logistics are quite complicated. There are still 24 bodies of hostages being held by the terrorist group inside Gaza. And there are some reports in Palestinian media today that I read that indicate more bodies may be released today. But the bottom line here is they have to actually find where they're located. Some of them were held in tunnels. Others were buried in locations across Gaza. And so as part of this Trump administration ceasefire deal, one of the line items actually indicates that there will be an international coalition. And this will not only involve possibly people on the ground inside Gaza, but also extensive intelligence work to try to identify where these bodies are located and facilitate their return to Israel.
Will Gaza allow the intelligence individuals to go into their area to look for these people?
It's a great question, and that's why I asked President Trump that question yesterday during our interview, whether or not he thinks phase 2 will actually succeed. And he's confident that it will. He says that the Americans still have leverage over Hamas, and he said they agreed to the terms of this deal. And so if they don't release the bodies, they will be in violation of President Trump's ceasefire agreement.
Wow. Excellent reporting, Trey. You were there on day 1, and it's so great to see an end to all of this and the hostages back home. Excellent reporting. Stay safe out there.
Thank you, Trey. You've done a great job, Trey.
Well, we are watching history unfold, which begs the question, how did we get here? One could argue it started in June during the 2-year war between Israel and Iran, when the United States launched Operation Midnight Hammer, striking 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities. It was a moment of deception, marking the largest B-2 operational strike in our country's history, severely damaging Iran's nuclear program.
Then on September 29th, President Trump unveiled his roadmap to end the 2-year-long war between Israel and Hamas, a 20-point Gaza peace plan, including an immediate ceasefire and the release of all remaining hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. By October 3rd, both sides agreed to come to the table for phase 1.
It was then Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner met with Hamas leaders last week to negotiate and seal the U.S. brokered deal. Approved and finalized by Israel, phase 1 of the peace deal is now underway, leading to the historic return of 20 living hostages yesterday. But more work needs to be done. Yesterday, only 4 of the 28 deceased hostages have been returned to Israel. Aram Cooper was 84 years old when he was taken hostage. He was killed in captivity, and his loved ones are still waiting for his body to be returned. Imran's son, Rotem Cooper, joins me now. Rotem, we are so sorry for the loss of your father, who was one of the founders of Kibbutz Nir Oz. What was yesterday like for you and your family?
You know, yesterday was a huge roller coaster day. You know, it started with great anticipation. Myself and Dalia, my wife, we went actually to the Re'im Junction. That's near the base where they first bring the hostages when they are coming out of Gaza. We were watching the the vans that were bringing them to the base. There were probably more than 1,000 people over there standing since the early hours of the morning. They're starting showing up around 10 a.m. It was very emotional, very, happy for a lot of people, including us. I'm from the New Orleans community. That's where I grew up. We had 4 that Ariel and David Conio, Matan Tsangauker, and Eitan Horn that, came out alive after 2 years. So there was a big uplifting. And then, of course, later in the day, we knew that we're going to go into a different mode, that we're going to start getting deceased hostages. But getting only 4, being notified only 4 was a shock. We met the families with Steve Witkoff on Saturday evening. we were getting briefs, intelligent briefs from various sources, and we thought that, it's more like maybe there is a legitimate issue with maybe a single-digit number that maybe going to be harder to retrieve. Yeah. But 4 is obviously meaning, it's obviously Hamas is playing games and is not doing it in good faith. 4, it's a weird number, but it's bringing it exactly to half. 20 plus 4 is 24, which is half of the 48. And it's very clear that Hamas chose that number probably not by mistake, and that Hamas is playing games. And the big question from us, we're not going to stop fighting, but I'm saying Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and Ivanka that talked to us are very clear that the U.S. is committed, and I think now it's putting to the test. Hamas is not negotiating in good faith. That's very clear. And now the next few days are crucial to send a very clear message to Hamas that this is not going to be tolerated.
Yeah. Well, there are still a lot of questions leading into phase 2. What do you think the future of Gaza will be like?
Well, I can tell you thing. Trump, has big plans for the region, and it's great. But I can tell you that it's not going to move forward without solving the hostage situation. And getting out all the 20 alive is great, more than we could expect a week ago. But Israel is not going to move forward without getting all the remaining 24. So the first thing to even think about, normalization, next phase, peace, it's all great. But nothing going to happen without these 24 hostages being returned. And it's very clear that Hamas can return almost all of them yesterday.
Yeah. These hostages who were released yesterday, they could have a long road ahead of them. Your mother was also taken hostage with your father and released in 2023. How is she doing now? Not too good. She lost her husband of 60 years. She's not living in a community that is, still for the most part, nobody lives in kibbutz Niroz. I would say she has what I think the syndrome of a Holocaust survivor. She doesn't want to talk about what's happening over there too much anymore. Yeah. So, getting back my father for proper burial is probably the minimum we as a society should do and owe her, to kind of get somewhat of a closure. There's never going to be a full closure on what's happened that day and the following 2 years. Well, there is no moving on from this, but we are praying that your father comes home to receive that proper burial that he and all of you deserve. Rotem Cooper, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Let's bring in Tal Heinrich, journalist and former spokesperson for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Tal, it has been a long, long 2 years. I still remember interviewing you when this war first began. 2 years. So much pain that the people of Israel have gone through, that these hostage families have gone through. Give me your thoughts as you're watching these images of what could be, hopefully, everlasting peace.
I would describe today as a national exhale in Israel. That would maybe come close to describing it. We haven't had many days throughout these 2 brutal years in which we could fully rejoice as a nation, and today was just one of those very rare moments. Those families, they deserve this moment of relief so much. We've seen many of them. They became very, very prominent, those faces, the families of the hostages on our national TV, but we've never seen these faces actually smiling for 2 years. And today, for the first time, we saw them smiling. So this was just one of those rare moments, including, the images that we see right now that you're just showing from Cairo. We've had peace summits in the past. We've had global leaders who came to our region and delivered speeches in the past, but right now it feels differently. First and foremost, because what we're witnessing obviously is a different Middle East, very much thanks to the effort and sacrifice, I should say, made by our soldiers who they created the conditions on the ground that allowed our leaders to facilitate this deal. And it's a deal that we haven't had on the table throughout this war. It's the first time that we had such a deal actually made feasible. And it's also thanks to the phenomenal leadership of Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump. Both of them, they did not succumb to international pressure or domestic pressure. They remained committed to doing what is right, not what's trendy, not what's simple, not what's been tried and failed time and again, not what's been chanted in these protests that you mentioned, but simply doing what is right. You talked a lot throughout this broadcast about how President Trump's speech resonated in Israel. I can tell you that many people in my country simply feel that, well, finally, that's a global leader who truly gets it. Someone who doesn't tell us, well, you'll have to bleed some more in the present just for the sake of empty slogans, empty promises that maybe down the road in the future you won't have to bleed more. You'll bleed some less. It's not only about what he said, how he told Israelis, promised Israelis rather, that Israel will no longer be threatened in any way, shape, or form. That's the quote. It's also about what he didn't say at the Knesset today. Notice, when was the last time you saw a global leader coming to a region, addressing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the notion of peace down the road, and not talking in those terms of the 1967 lines, the two-state solution, the Green Line, or settlements, as if that's the real impediment to peace and the essence of our conflict. He simply told Israelis, well, you guys won the war, now let's make peace. That's how you make actual peace, by not conflating diplomacy with achievement. That's something that both Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump did over this last period of working so tight together. And it hasn't been a common practice in the West recently, unfortunately. Many global leaders tend to conflate the two. These two leaders, they set a goal, they make it clear what it would mean as an achievement, and they use diplomacy as one tool out of various tools to achieving it.
Tal, we're watching the beast here that just pulled up. And I just quickly, before I let you go here, just 10 seconds here. Do you trust these countries that the president is sort of leaning on right now? The Qataris, Turkey, and the rest?
I don't have to trust Hamas's best friends. I trust this administration, I trust President Trump, and I trust our leadership that this is just phase one, and the other phases of the deal will be fulfilled as well.
Okay, Tal Heinrich, thanks for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank
Dana.
you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.